Who here is optimistic about cybersecurity, given some of the hacking that's been going on lately? There's some optimists, OK. But for the most part, it seems like people are worried. Thanks all for joining. It's my great pleasure to introduce General Keith Alexander, former head of the NSA. If you haven't heard of the NSA, they've heard of you. Just kidding, that's a joke. But General Alexander probably knows more about the plots going on overseas against this country than many other people. And right now, he runs a business called IronNet Cybersecurity. And to his right, we have Oren Falkowitz. Oren actually worked with Keith at the NSA. I'm told he actually gave briefings to him on Thursdays and often wore a bow tie. Is that true?
That's correct.
OK. Oren's running a company called Area 1 Security, and basically they are trying to prevent phishing attacks from being so outrageously successful. And to Oren's right, we have Marten. Marten is running one of the biggest bug bounty startups around, the biggest. If you have walked around Aspen Institute's campus, you may have noticed the latest issue of Fortune. The cover story involves hacking, and a piece I wrote for it involves bug bounty programs. So Marten is the expert on that topic, and it's a pleasure to have him here.
Thank you.
So first off, I wanted to ask a question to you, General Alexander. You've previously described cybercrime as the greatest transfer of wealth in human history. Given everything that's been going on lately with allegations of Russian interference in elections and power grid blackouts and troll armies and fake news, how would you describe the current climate?
Well, I still think the theft of intellectual property impacts our future. So think of that as countries stealing our intellectual property to create products that will compete with us in the future. So that's our future wealth. That's our children, our grandchildren. I think as we see the internet growing, the Internet of Things, and all the discussions that have been going on the last day, you see this internet and Internet of Things growing at a tremendous rate. And now cybersecurity, hacking, and everything that this panel is about is more at risk. Our nation lives on the internet. Our finances, what we do, our children play on the internet. We store our intellectual property. We communicate. And we're becoming increasingly interconnected. That's all at risk. And we've got to do something about it. And I believe that going back and saying the bad guys are attacking us is the wrong strategy. The bad guys are always going to attack us. We have to do a better job defending. And I think this is an area where we can create the best defensive infrastructure in the world, and we ought to do that.
On that point of building up better defenses, you're one of the few people who has had sort of private backdoor conversations with the president, President Trump, about cybersecurity, about defending this country and its intellectual property and critical infrastructure and all that goes along with it. What are your thoughts on that?
They're private. No, I'm just kidding. Actually, I'll give you my thoughts. It's interesting to go into, there's a lot of humor that goes into this, and I won't get into Twitter. You can tweet that later. But in talking to him in these closed-door sessions about cybersecurity, this is the person we want as president. He asked all the right questions. He was well prepared. He knew everything about what we're talking about. He asked the key points. What can I do to help? What do we have to do in government? And how do we protect the country? He was focused on it. So I think if you all could see that discussion, that's a different vision and a different perspective of our president than you get from watching the news and hearing everything that we hear. And so I was greatly uplifted by those sets of conversations, and I think it bodes well for what jointly we're trying to do. How do we protect this country? How do we protect our key infrastructure, our intellectual property, our future? And he understands that, and he's trying to help. I think it was really uplifting, so it was good.
Do you think some of those conversations should then be taken to Twitter so that everybody else can feel up?
Yeah, I think with 140 characters, I actually, it was kind of funny. They said, afterwards, we're going to have a press conference on the first one. I said, okay, that's great. And there were like 20 people in the room, and they said, we're going to go out and meet the press. And I said, great, okay. So, and then at the end, everybody stood up, and only 2 of us weren't in the administration, and Mayor Giuliani and I. And I thought, okay, so we're all going to go out and talk to the press. And then everybody started to leave. I said, is the press conference over? And they said, no, you're going to talk to the press. And I thought, this is like, I've seen this. It's almost biblical. We're going to put you out and see how you do. And actually, I told what I just said here to the press. And I do think there's great opportunity here. You know, it's interesting. My perspective on this, there is so much sensationalism and inflaming. We have big problems in this country, and cybersecurity is one of the biggest. Let's put some of that aside and come up with a strategy for addressing these problems. Let's go fix the problems.
Mm-hmm. And Oren, so you were previously a part of the Tailored Access Operations Unit, one of the
Can I say that?
most elite.
I don't think you should.
Okay.
I think if people know that.
All right, we'll just say you were a part of the NSA.
Okay.
One of the best.
Well, yeah, one of the very best.
That's very kind.
Okay, and so my question is, having been in the public sector and having now been in the private sector, what is more fun?
Oh, well, you know, I'm very proud of the, 7+ years that I spent at the National Security Agency. I learned a lot. It's a real opportunity to have a sense of mission that's sort of greater than one of yourself. And, NSA works at a scale and with a purpose that's unmatched by others. I think in this space, though, one of the challenges is that private companies need the help of what Marten and General Alexander and myself do in a way that government can't provide or hasn't known how to provide in the past. And so the need for that kind of expertise to transfer and to be able to go both ways is more critical than ever. It's just not the role of our government to be protecting every business out there. And of course, cybersecurity issues are ones that don't just impact banks or energy sector or oils, they impact public schools and retailers. Probably everyone in this room has had their credit card number stolen as a result of a hack at a retailer, things that are outside the critical infrastructure. And so I think it's been a great opportunity to bring that and help people.
And you believe that this is more of a private sector issue or more of a public sector issue? Businesses are getting hacked all over the place.
It's just not the role of our government to protect everyone in our country on these types of business issues. There are some aspects of critical infrastructure where they can have closer ties, but most of the people in this room who are running private companies cannot rely on the type of work that we used to do or other elements of the government to protect them. And they need to be taking steps to protect the people within their organizations, their intellectual property, that's the role of companies and software companies. And they should be able to hold those companies accountable to do the work that they say they're going to do.
And now, Marten, so your company has actually helped certain military branches host bug bounty programs. Could you give us a quick, brief explainer on what is a bug bounty program and tell us what the results of some of those were?
Right. We have over 100,000 hackers, freelancers all over the world who are ready to hack anybody on their invitation. And the purpose is to hack them before the bad guys hack them. So it's like an immunization where when you know about your vulnerabilities, you can fix them before they're exploited criminally. So a year ago, we were contacted by the Pentagon, and they said, could you run a program for us? And then we ran Hack the Pentagon, which was a revolutionary name for the federal government to pick that name for the campaign, Hack the Pentagon. We had 1,400 cleared and vetted hackers hacking for 8 weeks. They thought we would find maybe half a dozen vulnerabilities, maybe a dozen if we do really well. We found 138 valid vulnerabilities that needed to be fixed. And the first one we found within 13 minutes of opening the program. And the youngest hackers were high school students from all over the US.
And these are good hackers, right?
Well, some were not that good, some were very good. It's a big bunch, but this shows the power of the crowd. That when you bring in an unbiased group who has no former information about the system, they're actually more creative and they'll work harder than the one on the inside who is paid a salary to test the system. So it's not a question of them being smarter, it's a question of them having an unbiased attitude towards hacking, and they always find something.
And as I understand, you're trying to change the economics around this. Could you go into that a little bit more? How you're trying to make it more economically, good to do defense rather than attacking?
Right. Well, we know that this is the best way to secure software. You can keep buying firewalls and all kinds of endpoint protection to no end, and it won't make you secure. But when you find a vulnerability and fix it, you are concretely more secure. And we've already seen our customers fix 50,000 vulnerabilities through our system. So therefore, we are trying to turn it into a complete giant army that can serve any company that's software powered, so that anybody can reach out and get the help of the same experts. Because it's the same hackers who hack the Pentagon, they hack Airbnb, they hack Intel, Qualcomm, Microsoft. Those same super talented hackers are also ready to hack you because they're so hungry for hacking. So that's how you pool the resources and everybody gets the best result.
Now, I'd like to ask you, General Alexander, because there's a debate that's going on about bugs and vulnerabilities, and the government needs some of these in order to do the work that it does. Some of the intelligence work that it does. How do you strike this balance between retaining some that you can use strategically versus disclosing some to companies, as Marten is doing with HackerOne?
So they have publicly talked about an equities process. And an equities process is where you look at what's good for the country. And in that, most of the capabilities that you're going to see the intelligence community use is how you go after terrorists. And so what you're balancing is what's something that a bug or vulnerability that should be shared immediately with everybody. More than 90% fall into that category and are shared. So NSA and other intelligence organizations do that. But there are some that are exceptionally difficult to find that someone is going to make an equities decision process on now, which is done at the White House and the interagency, not at NSA. At NSA, what we would do during my time is to balance that to say, one, if we keep it, we have to have a rapid way, if that ever gets out, to share it with industry right away. And two, to track to see if it's out. So you have to have some kind of equities process to do that. Vulnerabilities are just that. And of course, sometimes vendors find them and they fix them and they go on their way. Yeah. I think the interesting part is the number of vulnerabilities that are provided by NSA and the intelligence community is huge. It's just not publicly understood. And so that's one of the key things. And I think everybody's there hoarding these. The reality is, you know, you want to protect our nation from being attacked by terrorists. You want to protect airlines. You want to protect all these things from happening in our allies. And that's a decision process. And it was, you know, it was amazing to sit in on the National Security Council meetings and go through that. How do you do that? And the answer is, this isn't something where we're saying, let them guys suffer. It's a real effort with people actually trying to balance that.
Do you think that the decision process that's currently used, do you think that's ideal, that it's in its best form and shape?
I think it's the best that they can do right now. And you know, the issue is if you could completely secure it. We made this statement to both President Bush and President Obama. If you could completely secure the internet and assure that, we ought to do it. Because we have more to lose than anyone else. If you can't, now you're into this equities process and how do you operate in the internet in a way that allows you to defend the country, to protect and do other things. So that's the issue that you have.
I think, Robert, just to jump in, I think it's a mistake to focus on vulnerabilities or flaws or damage or who did it. And
I wanted to ask you about this because phishing is what you go after. A lot of people like to focus on flashy zero-day vulnerabilities. But
those are important things. I mean, they exist and they cause damage. But the people in this room, as you're thinking about protecting themselves, you need to focus on time and action. When do these things get discovered? And when can you take action? It turns out in the WannaCry example that you mentioned as we were coming on stage, Microsoft released a patch for that a pretty considerable amount of time before it was taken advantage of. And
anybody get hit with WannaCry here, by the way? Probably nobody wants to say.
Vulnerabilities and flaws exist because humans create software. They're not invented, they're discovered. And so the work that Marten's doing is about time to increase that discovery, and the work that we focus on is times to close the attack vector or to protect people in action forms. And we spend too much time talking about what potential flaws there could be or who's behind them or what the damage could be, rather than actually taking the actions that will protect ourselves.
You've actually begun to insure your product, is that right?
Yes, we call it a guarantee. You know, we think that When our customers do business with us, they've been having no success with technologies that they've used in the past, and they should have accountability for us that our product will work the way that we describe it. So we provide a guarantee around damage related to phishing, and we haven't had any claims yet.
Some people have been calling this trend of adding insurance to cybersecurity products a gimmick. What do you think about that?
You know, I think that a good business is to put your money where your mouth is, right? Our product works as it's designed, and if it doesn't, you should be able to get some form of your money back if there's damage. This is how my car works. This is how a lot of, if my jeans rip, I can take them back to wherever I get my jeans from, I don't know, and things of that nature.
All right, I'd like to open the floor up to questions in just a moment. I'm going to ask Marten one more question, but if you've got something, think of it and hold it. Marten, so one disparity that goes along with these markets for vulnerabilities is that the darker markets, the blacker markets, the underground markets, they can pay a lot more. So how do you achieve, how do you make it economically feasible to get hackers to report these vulnerabilities to companies which pay less than, say, spy agencies?
The hackers we have on our network have so much vested in the network, their prestige, their profile, the social acknowledgement that they get, and the money that they make. So for them, it doesn't make sense to sell something criminally and risk all of that. So even as the black market pays 5 to 10 times more for a single vulnerability, because we have the power of the crowds and the strength in numbers, we will always have a young, eager hacker who will report that exact same vulnerability through us and get paid perhaps just 10,000, but it's enough to report it to the owner of the system, they'll fix it, and the black market collapses. Hasn't happened fully yet, but I think over time, as this community grows from 100,000 hackers to 1 million hackers and beyond, we will be able to find and pay legal bounties for all vulnerabilities before they end up in the black market.
All right, so I'd like to open the floor up. Looks like we have a question over here. If you could identify yourself too, that'd be great.
Sure. Hi, my name is Alana King. I'm here with Stanford and Code 2040. And my question is, what is the panel's thoughts on cyber attacks powered by artificial intelligence? Is this something that we need to be concerned about? And if so, how do you prepare and defend against that?
Well, I mean, the reality today is that over 95% of cyber attacks start as a result of phishing, which is user-generated at users, and 100% of attacks, in my estimation, are people trying to do their job correctly. So there's no reason for attackers to go to extreme lengths when they're having great success doing very basic forms of penetration to begin with.
But your question going into the future is important. And what you're hitting on is, as countries look at cyber as an element of national power, they're going to use AI and alternate means to try to test networks. So think of this as taking everything that Marten's team understands and automating that in an AI platform, and then using that to start testing areas and way of doing it. The consequence says that industry and government has to work together, so that when you're being tested like that, who's the 911 you call? Right now, if you dial 911, you get no answer. And so that's the partnership between government and industry that we have to create.
I think there's a point when you look at any threat in society, you have to look at asymmetries and see who has an asymmetric benefit. And criminals always have the benefit of being able to be very few and causing a lot of damage to a large group. But what we have on our side is collaboration. So when we collaborate across multiple companies or organizations, we can respond much faster, and we do have access to faster, better technology. So sure, there will be an arms race, and every year here we'll ask, will it be AI, machine learning, what will they use? Of course, criminals will use anything to reach their goals, but they lack the massive power of us, because in any society, the proportion of bad guys to good guys it's maybe one bad guy for 1,000 good guys. So we have a lot of defense to reach out to and defend ourselves, even against AI. And of course, we'll use AI in the defense.
Another question over here. If we can keep it short, maybe to 1 minute, that would be.
So Almost all exploits happen either because there's a bug in the code, there's a failure in configuration, or users do the wrong thing, which I consider to be a bug in the user experience.
Could we get your name, by the way?
Sorry, Nico van Summeren from the Linux Foundation. So I'd like to get the panel's opinion on liability from the vendors for the failures of their products.
Well, like I said, at Area 1, we guarantee no damage as a result of the phishing. So I think that's an important trend if you can back it up. But I would just disagree that it's a flaw in the humans. The software works as designed. The humans are just sort of manipulated to take some action that's unwanted. And often the code is working as it's designed. It's just...
It's a flaw in the user experience. The product should have been designed better to make it harder for the users to do the wrong thing.
Just quickly, I would disagree, because it's our job to create technology to help users, but creating a website that accepts usernames and passwords but looks like a large financial institution is not a flaw in the user experience. It's actually the user experience, and that's what attackers take advantage of, is the authenticity of the things that we trust, not tricks that are flaws in that way.
So I think we need to create a more comprehensive solution that addresses this. I think putting liability on will stifle initiative and innovation. And so that's a really tough road. I think it's something we should consider, but it's difficult.
I think we have another question back here.
Sure. Michael Miller, Ziff Brothers, and PC Magazine. For General Alexander, where are we drawing the line between normal spying and cyber warfare, as the term is used?
Well, I think it's the intent. When you think about cyber warfare, the intent is to inflict damage of some sort, and spying is to go in and try to steal another nation's secrets to understand what they're doing. So it is understood that nations spy on each other. You may have read some of that recently. Having said that, every nation does that. It's interesting to see everybody spying on everybody to understand the intent of other nations. It would be good if we could get all nations into an area, or at least all our allies, of trust and confidence that you don't need to do that. That would be a great step. Where cyber war comes in is when you now intend to do something. And so I would say what's going on against Sony, what's going on against the Ukraine, crosses that boundary. And so now we're looking at a nation state who has the intent to do harm, whether it was in physical space or cyberspace. Now, that's my interpretation, and I've said that in the administrations that I served in and publicly. So I think that's what we've got to look at. Nations are going to test us in cyberspace, and non-nation state hackers that have nation state-like capabilities will test us in cyberspace.
So we're getting near the close here, but I'd like to ask you all, very quickly, since I asked the audience whether they're optimistic, I want to know from you whether things are actually improving in security. Yes or no? We can just get a quick gut check from each of you.
It absolutely is improving because it's now a topic for everybody on the highest level. It's a topic for the US president. It's a topic for boards of directors, for audit committees, for CFOs and CEOs, and that will ensure that security will slowly but surely happen.
Yeah, I don't think the trend is improving today, but the potential is there. And that's something, the awareness of the issues is to all of our benefit, but if everyone takes action, I think we can get there.
I think awareness is improving. I'm not sure that our implementation is improving as fast as the threat and technology is changing.
Well, it certainly seems like there are plenty of attacks going on, but thank you all for joining, and thank you everybody for listening in.